Hey guys, welcome to the Markcast. Reed here. Surely this episode will ruffle no feathers today. UFL Merger. Is the USFL carrying its weight? A good discussion today. Lots of fun things coming up on the podcast. I'll keep this intro short, get to all the interviews here. 3 great interviews today. Valid discussions here as we approach UFL Week 4. Some of the attendance, did Fox kind of sour the well in some of these markets, giving away tickets here the last couple seasons? Now we're trying to get the Memphis attendance up, Michigan, all of that. I know Birmingham showed up last week, 12,000. I know they're competing against Alabama and all of that. We'll see what they do this weekend here, coming up, hosting again the D.C Defenders. That should be a good game, but lots of fun stuff today. We have USFL historian Paul Reeths joining from OurSports Central. Really appreciate that, Paul. Has written books on USFL, has been on through all of the different, the branding of the league and then the lawsuits and everything with the USFL and Fox back from old ownership there. So always appreciate getting Paul's thoughts on everything. Really wide-ranging conversation with them. The TV broadcast, the attendance. So we talk a little bit of football teams and stuff, storylines of the season. So certainly hope you guys enjoy that. TSN's Dave Naylor coming on, talking all things CFL, Chad Kelly's of it all, Edmonton Elks, lots of things I'm sure we'll get into with Dave. And then Matt McCrane of the D.C Defenders, game-winning field goal kicker here last week. They're going into Birmingham. It should be a great game this weekend, so excited for that. If you like the work that we are doing on here, like 70 away, like and subscribe, get us to 3,500 subscribers. We will be at the UFL championship game. And if we get to 3,500 before that, we will be giving away 2 tickets to the championship game. I think you'll even be able to sit with the Professor Andrew Murray, I think is what we're going to do for that. I don't know if he signed up for that, but we'll get you going. So like and subscribe. Lots of work going in all the time on this, getting interviews and stuff. Appreciate Dave Naylor taking time and DC Defenders getting that set up with the league. So, and obviously with Paul getting his busy schedule coming on. So if you like the work that we do, all the friends that come on, like and subscribe. Hope you guys enjoy the interviews. We'll see you at the end. Well, we're back here. We have Paul Reeths, USFL historian with OurSports Central. We were done with the UFL kickoff, and I'm sitting there talking with Dorothy. I go, I'm such a dummy. I didn't have Paul on to do the pre-show kickoff stream, but we can remedy that today, get a longer discussion with Paul Reeths. Paul, first off, how are you? And why don't you we have a lot of new subscribers, so maybe just a quick elevator pitch of who you are.
Great. Thanks for having me on. Things are going well here. I'm an old guy, so I followed the original USFL very closely as a young man, never quite got it out of my blood, and wrote a book on the league, did a lot of research and interviews just with various people involved. And that kind of led to my interest in secondary alternative leagues. And with that interest, I started OurSportsCentral.com about 25 years ago and have followed that up since with StatsCrew.com. OurSports Central covers news from around alternative and minor leagues, and Stats Crew covers all the statistics, including the historical statistics for a lot of minor and alternative leagues, as well as the majors.
Perfect. And, Paul's here today, so we're going to talk general thoughts, kind of football, and then I wanted to get into kind of the thesis here this week of, is the USFL carrying its weight here in the merger? First off, we're going into week 4. Vibes I get, I'm watching That's Good Sports on YouTube as well. I got turned on to that. He does funny NFL recaps, but seems that the quality of football, people are impressed, people are happy. Kind of, how are you viewing the season thus far now that we have the 8 teams?
I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but more on the good side than the bad side. I think you touched on probably my biggest takeaway so far is that the quality of football seems to be improved over both leagues last year. We've seen tremendous kicking, for instance. Our author, Franz Dutchberg, just did an article that had detailed how improved the kicking has been. To me, when I watched that St. Louis-Arlington game a couple weeks ago, you can put that up against any football game from the last year, NFL, CFL, whatever. That was a great football game, a tremendous atmosphere, and came down to the wire. It was just very well played. And I think you really do see a lot of that throughout the league. So that's been positive. Attendance, of course, has been a bit of a mixed bag. But I do think that the television presentation has remained very solid. I like the energy and that the ESPN and ABC folks bring to the mix, but I also think Fox is up their game this year.
It's funny to me because, yeah, it really does depend on who you ask. Like, some people are very anti the ESPN broadcast. Like, I'm pretty kind of neutral to all of it. I mean, there's certain guys like the Steve Levy's of it all on ESPN kind of get on my nerves screaming. I mean, he's not part of it. Like, but certain announcers might bother me, but I'm generally not. But yeah, it seems like you're either Team Fox or Team ESPN. It's kind of weird how there's a divide there. Always got to have these divides here with the spring football, right?
Well, and I mean, a lot of it is that we're less than a year away from watching both of them, and they were different presentations. And I think what we're seeing now is a little bit of a blend. But I really do like the energy, and I've enjoyed the broadcast by and large.
Do you like the branding now that this is the premier spring football league? We've come together. Do you like, because I know we've talked to you and through all this kind of merger stuff, but now that we've seen it kind of in action and what they want this to look and feel like, are you liking the branding around it? Because to me, we still don't really have an identity. Maybe we'll get that next year.
Yeah, and a little bit, it's so dizzying. We saw the relaunch of the XFL, which looked different than the previous versions of the XFL. We saw, another relaunch of the XFL, which looked different than the prior two versions. Then we saw the launch of the USFL, which looked a little bit different than the original USFL. And so now we're seeing yet a new entity, and there's blendings of the old and the new branding. And I think we're still so new to it that it's really hard to get a feel for how it's different than maybe some of the predecessors and how it's going to end up standing out. We say the same thing every time. Hopefully by year 5 or by year 3, let's cross our fingers. Let's hope that we get that far and really do feel like we have, a discernible identity.
Because and this came up on our live stream on Monday. We were recapping, or I guess we did it Tuesday. We were recapping the weekend and, talking attendance, and we'll get into all that here. But I said, if you're a casual person, this league doesn't make sense at all how it is right now. It makes sense because we know how we got to it, where we had 18. Like, you would never pick 3 Texas teams, Memphis, Michigan, St. Louis, DC. That would never be. But it's like, well, because they started in Birmingham, and then we did this and we did that. Like, is it striking you? I mean, TV audience has been, consistent, right? They went up against the Masters this week, and Fox and ABC are certainly showing their power for that. But I don't know. It's hard for me when they're showing like maps of the U.S. and 2/3 of it aren't represented and kind of where the teams are, like trying to get that national appeal. But maybe people don't care. Maybe it's just football on TV, and that's what people are liking.
And I do think that it does make a difference. We don't have anything out west at all. In addition, the Northeast is really represented solely by Washington, D.C. Well, a New Yorker, a Bostonian, how much do they care about that? So, just having 8 markets and 3 of them in Texas, I don't think is helping the TV ratings. I do believe that the networks that are involved are fully aware of that they just don't have a real broad base. What they're really scraping here is that core group that's going to watch professional football no matter what.
Yeah, and even, there was the not leak, but kind of the thing a couple weeks ago, like new trademarks, that it was Canton and Nashville. I'm like, that doesn't help with your national appeal. Like, I for the life of me, I can't figure out why we can't get anything going in San Diego, except maybe that stadium is just too busy now they have built. Like, I just can't wrap my mind how you can't just get a flight from Dallas to San Diego and get this going.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, your operations aren't going to be based in the state anyway, as long as you have the Arlington hub. So you would think that it would be wide open. I know that the people who were in Canton who went to the games last year really missed them. There just weren't that many of them. Canton would be a horrible mistake. It would not help at all with the TV ratings. It just didn't make any sense from that standpoint. It's just really, when the USFL did that, they took on all the costs of another hub and absolutely zero benefit besides a kind of decent stadium.
Are you surprised now that we're gotten this far that it's we're doing the XFL business model with, we basically just adopted some of these USFL teams. I mean, we knew kind of the Arlington of it all, but I guess that bears fruit to kind of the way the XFL had been doing it from the beginning, even if it was costing more to do this flying in and out. Because certainly, I think if the USFL had its way or saw success on that side, we would have just done 2 or 3 hubs and not been flying out to all of these cities.
I think that's certainly right. It does show that the USFL business model that, they sat down in the room and compared numbers, and they didn't go with the more expensive proposition there. They didn't go with the one that made less sense. So the Arlington hub made a lot of sense, and just flying out to the individual markets. I think that there was a realization on Fox's side that, yes, we're a TV network. Yes, the ratings are going to be the big driver here, but attendance is also important. It's more than just having props. It's more than just having the people as a backdrop, that there's a piece of the revenue equation eventually that's going to have to be carried by attendance. And whether that's 20% or 40% or 50%, whatever, we can't just write it off with $10 tickets. Or I think I ran the numbers last year in Memphis. If you went to both Houston and Memphis games, you could sit in the end zone for like $3 a game, which is ridiculous. What I think there's been a realization that we can't do that long term. That's hurting us. We need to turn this ship around. And so I think you're seeing, by and large, more normalized ticket prices in a lot of these markets.
Because, and we talk, and even the Monday, the attendance and Birmingham showed up, and I have the numbers here, I'll pull up. But you get all this like, well, it doesn't matter, right? It's TV, it's all TV, it's all TV. And we've talked about this, and we've learned people don't like watching football with nobody in the stands, right? It's really hard. We've learned this with the USFL. It's such a like, what's going on here? Are they, any casual fan that's tuning in, it's like, why is there no one here? So there's that. The energy level of it, but then also, if you're trying to get people to eventually buy these franchises, which we've been told is the plan, and I think that keeps getting kicked down the road now as we, maybe the USFL had that, year 5 to 7. Well, maybe that's another 5 to 7 years from now, but you get, looking here, Memphis is averaging 8,700 people a game. Like, what am I buying there if I'm buying a Memphis franchise?
It's a great question. I think right now what you'd be buying is the concept. I don't know that necessarily anybody except the guy who owns FedEx would be looking at that Memphis franchise. It certainly has been a really slow start there, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. But what you'd be buying is a concept. You'd be buying, hey, I want the San Diego market. I want Seattle. I want Denver. Those probably would make more sense to a buyer right now than some of the markets where we're seeing really minimal attendance, unless things suddenly turn around in those markets.
I equated it to, it's kind of like how some of these private ownerships with the CFL teams, where it's like, they would be like, I don't want to buy a yacht. I want to go buy a CFL team. And then, we have like Amar Doman in BC, and putting tremendous, that's something he just really believes in and wants to rebuild that and work with the amateur football. But that is a huge, like, he is dumping the money, and he is, One Republic comes up and LL Cool J comes, we're having all these bands. That's him dumping money. And yeah, I think that's what you're looking for here with the UFL. It's not going to be, here, buy this and turnkey, you're going to make money. It's, you're going to need to put in your own time. Do you see it similarly?
Yeah. And the advantage that the CFL has is decades of history, so that these guys can look back and say, I remember watching them on TV, or I was in the stadium when this happened, or this was a part of me growing up, or, at some point in my life, I really connected with this. So they have more of those people who will come in and say, you know what, I can stand to lose a little bit of money, or maybe I'll really, over the long term, kind of draw even on this. That's fine with me. Whereas the UFL, we don't have that yet, and it would take a long time to build. So they've got to be looking at some extra intangibles that they're going to build into a UFL franchise in order to sell them. And I do think that it's a few years down the line.
Well, and even with the CFL, there's the promise of like, hey, maybe every 4 or 5 years you might get a Grey Cup, and then you really get some money coming back into the city.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I can't remember. I think when they were talking about one of the sales that came out, and it was like that was part of the guarantee. It was like, hey, we're going to get you a Grey Cup here just to kind of
Sure.
make sure you don't have multi-million-dollar event coming in every year here with the UFL that's going to generate that.
And, we could be looking at a similar situation in a few weeks here. St. Louis puts a really nice crowd into the dome for the championship game, no matter who's in it. That could be a nice revenue generator. And if you can promise that every 8 or 10 years or more, that might be something that helps sway somebody. I don't think that we'd be looking at that in the next couple of years, but maybe down the line.
Yeah. So I have a tweet here, and this is from Counter Day on Twitter. This is running down kind of the average attendance. This is just a good way to kind of visualize it. I had Max kind of run these numbers as well, so that because I hate like seeing this and okay, this is whatever. But what to me, and I hate being the like whatever, but it's exposing these USFL markets, right? That came in, Memphis. Now that we're not giving away tickets, $3 tickets, right? Even Houston on here. Doing the whole switch and bait with that. I think we're seeing a disparity here. Now, Birmingham showed up, 12,000 there, game one. You would like to see that for a team that's been in the city 3 years. I know they have the Alabama game going on. Looking at this, general thoughts, and then we can dive in more.
Yeah, and looking at Houston, I think that the stadium switch has really affected them this year as well. I don't think that we're far enough into the season to really see that the roster switch has hurt, but not having Wade Phillips there probably hurts a little bit. Yeah, and with the rest of it, Birmingham, we've got the one game which was easily the best of the USFL draws so far. One of the things that we're looking at is that I believe they increased ticket prices in all those markets, and so it's no longer that $10 seat. So not only are people looking at an increase in the ticket prices, but when they set those values over the last year or two, people are used to those $10 tickets. That's what their football team is worth to them now. And so I think this was probably the biggest mistake that Fox made was they devalued their product to the local populace rather than selling at a normal rate for any other team. They were so interested in getting people in as backdrop, so that it looked like there were people in the stadium on TV, that they forgot about the long term. And I don't think they really helped themselves that much in the short term. I think it was a tremendous mistake the way they priced their tickets. And that's really reflected in 3 different places on this attendance chart.
In terms of, and this is, kind of, again, my thesis this week, is the USFL carrying its weight? I don't know. And I always struggle even with like the Roughnecks brand, whatever, but like, I don't know what cachet like a Michigan Panthers, a Memphis Showboats has here in 2024 outside of, my age or your age higher, you get that, but I just don't know where. I don't know, the DC Defenders, and I know they're where are they at right now? 15,000 average. I think they had 2 home games, right? Like it's at least it's a sexy new brand, right? The Battlehawks, and then they're kind of standard of that. But I don't know if we're getting exposed that way. Also, the cachet of some of these just quantity or entities not having in 2024.
I mean, I don't think that there's really any debating it. I think you're absolutely right that obviously the attendance would, for outdoor football to have attendance under 8,000, I'm not that far away from Green Bay, and they can draw that for an indoor football game. It's amazing to me, and they're doing that at full ticket prices. It really is amazing to me how much these markets have struggled. And there are some reasons. Memphis, for instance, has had a team in every single league that there's been. Birmingham too, and you see the before this with the collapse of the alliance, that couldn't have helped the local markets at all. But I think your point is right about the USFL branding, which I love. There's nobody who loves the original USFL branding more than I do. But I think they found that it was of limited benefit here in the 2020s.
Is that as someone that, obviously has built a large, a business that stemmed from all this, is that disheartening? I mean, is it, because I think people come on like, oh, like Paul's going to rag on whatever, Reed's going to rag on, like, this is something that's been a large portion of your life and a lot of people's lives to see it kind of get to this point.
It doesn't. What I look at the original USFL as something that had a beginning, it had a middle, and it had an end. And they really have had, by and large, so little to do with the current happenings, with the new league that took on that old name, that it's a new entity. And so that's the way that I looked at the USFL last year. And so you can't compare attendance in the 2022 and 2023 USFL to the 1980s USFL. It would have been tremendously unfair to the new one. You can't compare the quality of play, where the original USFL was competing for the best players. That's what made them a major league. And the new USFL is really it was really a developmental league. And really everything since the original USFL has been a developmental league. And that's fine. And I do enjoy it. I enjoyed NFL Europe and I enjoyed the World League, and I've enjoyed everything that's come since. So there's no insult at all from my perspective there. It just really is what it is. In order to be a major league, you have to compete for the best players. And clearly none of these leagues are in a position to do that. The XFL wasn't, the USFL wasn't. There's no shame in that. The NFL is a multi-billion-dollar juggernaut. You're not going to compete with that right now, and you're certainly not going to do that in the spring. So I enjoy these leagues for what they are.
I mean, so I agree with you, but we had Daryl Johnston on before the season, and he talks about, they don't want to be a developmental league. I mean, what do you say to that, just as a side note here before we keep going? Like, because like you said, I mean, you're a decade away from even being to the point where I just curious your thoughts on that, where he says they want to move away from that.
Oh, I mean, there's perception versus reality, so I can understand that he doesn't want to be perceived in that way. The reality is, unless you're taking people off NFL rosters or taking collegiates that the NFL wants, you're a developmental / minor league. That's all there is to it.
So what do we do here? Because like you said, I do think, going back, if we could reverse course and go back a couple of years here and the price appropriately, like, what do we do at this point here with the USFL markets, right? How do you rebuild that? And I know that like if we all knew how to do that, it would be done. But thoughts about that? Because I do think, like you said, irreparable damage in some of these markets.
I mean, it's going to be super hard to turn the ship around, I think, where you've already devalued your product. I mean, how do you take that away? The only, I'm thinking of John Spoelstra. He was former NBA exec who wrote about how to sell the last seat in the house. And I think that was kind of the ticket seller's Bible. And, one of the ways that you do that is by increasing the value of your ticket, more freebies maybe, or player visits, or, exclusive ticket holder events. There are some of those things that maybe can be done. I don't know how much that bumps the needle in these markets, to be honest. You may be looking at choosing the markets where you think you can build and then reassigning teams to other markets where you can't.
That's my fear. I mean, I agree with that, but my fear is if you do that, then you're like, how locked in are you to any of these markets, right? I mean, I think you got to go. Like, do you pull out of Michigan at the end of this year? I don't know. Then what does that say to the next? I always equate when the new ownership took over the Washington Commanders and everyone said, well, they're going to fire Ron Rivera. And they said, no, we're going to give him a season because we want the next head coach coming in to know that we'll also give them the full kind of benefit of that. So I don't know what you do if you pull the plug and then you move and then to San Diego. Well, God, if we don't get enough people here, they're going to pull it in a year.
Yeah. And, you mentioned Michigan. At least you have market size with Detroit. Whereas in a place like Memphis, if you're struggling with attendance and you're not, your market size is not doing much to help the TV rating, then that's when you really have to take a good hard look at how can we turn this ship around? Can we turn this ship around? and then do we move? So, a couple different things that you think about is, do you move a team, or do you expand first and then contract? So that, I don't know what the right answer is there. The other thing that I think about is the original American Football League. If you look at how that league started, and of course, everyone knows that the original American Football League ended up merging 10 teams into the NFL and is part of the NFL multi-billion-dollar juggernaut now. But originally, they were drawing 3,000 to 7,000 in Oakland. They had to move out of Los Angeles. They had to move out of Dallas. So there were a lot of things that happened there, but part of it was in places like Oakland and New York. They were able to build from those meager beginnings, partially because the league built around them. And you entered a new stadium situation in New York, but they were able to continue to build in Oakland, for instance. Yeah. So you have to, okay, what can we develop a 5-year plan on? Which markets can we do we think that we can actually improve? And which markets are we actually just wasting our time and we'd be better served getting out of right now?
I am always the Mr. Pessimist on here. I just don't, and I, believe in this space and want it to succeed. I just don't know what the long-term play is here, where we saw Redbird after one season of loss, like, okay, we need to downsize. We need to do this. Fox the same way. Maybe we're 7 years away from getting ownership. Ratings are good, right? We're averaging 800 to 1 million viewers. Is that enough? Are we happy enough with that for the next 4 or 5 years? I would love to be a fly on the wall and kind of know, what are the metrics here we're trying to hit? Because both of these ownership groups now coming together seem very gun shy about losing any money at some point. And we talked on the Monday show, like when I quit my day job to freelance, at some point you got to pull the plug, take a hit, and then build up the other way. But you can't just kind of meander along at this pace. Right.
And I think Fox has to be encouraged by ratings because of what they saw last year. They had to wonder, are we on a downward slide where this thing is it's just not working? And to see a rebound, I think for them has to be helpful. If anything, I would say that I maybe underestimated Redbird Capital a little bit, and just how much capital Redbird has. This is a group that has been in talks to buy CBS. So these people have a lot of resources. Now, if they have the patience and the plan to continue with this, we'll see. But I'm encouraged by the level of operations that we've seen throughout the league. Even just from a media relations standpoint, I think these teams have taken a step up, particularly the former USFL teams. They actually have people issuing press releases and game notes and all the things that you'd normally expect. And that was probably part of the hole that was dug last year and even the year before, where people are like, these people don't even really treat this like a real league. From a media standpoint, it was certainly obvious. And I would imagine that translated in how the media talks to fans, if they talk to them at all about your product, and in fan perception as well after that.
Respectfully, yes. And I do enjoy having the USFL teams, having people respond. I like the media portal. Not all reps are created equal, right? I mean, you get a little bit about that, but like, even in terms of that, I get the press release every week, like, hey, Arlington, they're doing a practice. If you want to come at 9, film the first 30 minutes. And then like Bob Stoops is going to be around at 12:20. And then, Luis Perez, whatever, at 12:30. I would love to meet a single media rep that's going to go to an Arlington Renegades game or a practice, on a Wednesday at 9. Like I used to do that for the Seahawks, and we'd go film and you'd go do the first 10 minutes. And then, you'd sit around because you're waiting to talk to, Russell Wilson or whatever. Right. I don't know if we're at that point yet. So yes, I appreciate it, the access in that way. I would be curious the number of people that are taking advantage of that.
And it's hard with the hub, that is one of the difficulties that the hub introduces. As much as it certainly saves them on the cost side, that exposure in the local markets is part of the price that they pay for that. And that's one of the areas I think that they really need to continue to do some thinking about how you get exposure in the local market. Does that mean you fly a select group of players in a day early to the local market, just to meet, greet, do all those things that you would do if you were locally based? Your cheer team, are they always around and available, treated well so that they're more than willing to go to parades and different other things just to keep your name and your brand out there? It is one of those things that the league has to overcome, and setting up video meetings is certainly helpful. It does allow local media to interact. So there are some options, but they are going to have to get creative, not only in how you really help the press connect with the team members, but in how you maintain a local presence in the market when you're really only there a day or two, 5 times a year.
I think that's really hard. And I think that's what I've learned this season with having all the reps and everything. And we'll start winding this conversation down here soon. I appreciate your time. It is that it's, I go on I don't have time to like do all, hey, it's Wednesday at whatever on the Zoom. I try my best and I'll look at the recordings afterward. You might have 3 people on there, right? You might have 2 people on there talking to whoever. Like, I don't, not being in the markets besides the fan stuff. And they do a good job. I think like, hey, we're doing a meet and greet, like right before, they trying to do some things that way, little town halls and stuff. But yeah, getting the media. I know Anthony was at the Renegades game. I think it was last week. Like, I think he said there were 7 people in the press box, which just is not a bird in the, and that's the hub that you're in, let alone, what does Michigan look like? I haven't had a chance to go, I was at the kickoff game, obviously, but, I imagine St. Louis is packed. I imagine DC is packed. Like, I don't know what the Memphis Showboats press box looks like on game day.
And that's tough. It's tough. You're going to have a little bit limited media buy-in because of that. So one of the things that I am encouraged with is that, and it particularly contrasting last year's USFL teams with this year's UFL teams, is that you can get transaction notices, you can get game notes, you can get game recaps. These were all things that were missing out of the USFL puzzle last year. And last year they had taken a step up from the prior year, where it was basically, if we can't release it on Colin Cowherd, we're just not going to bother to release it. So they've continued to kind of up those operations. So when I say that I'm encouraged by the media relations, there's still a lot of improvements that could be made, but they have taken some steps.
Oh, yeah. Night and day compared to, especially with the USFL. And that was because last year they had like the hubs had media people, and then having people dedicated, the media portal's great, all that stuff. Last note from me, we were talking TV ratings and all of that. And I know that Mike Mulvihill, I can never say his last name, with the Fox Sports guy, tweeting out, like it's 47% increase, whatever, because they're consolidating all these TV time slots, right? We're giving Fox at noon, whatever. What struck me, and curious your thoughts, like, I think we're learning it doesn't matter if it's the USFL, the XFL, UFL, like if it's on a good time slot, people are going to watch. Like, I don't know how many. Now I know we've talked this whole, interview about USFL, hurting their local markets in that way. And I do stand by that. But I think a general TV audience is like, they don't know if it's the Stars or the rough, like, okay, which one is this league? Which, especially like when the leagues were competing last year during the same time.
Yeah. And one of the big helps in TV ratings so far is removal of games from USA and FS1. Now I think there's an FS1 game this week.
Yeah, this one's going to be rough this weekend.
Yeah, that'll be the roughest rating. But those ratings were they dragged down the whole average last year and the year before. So it has been very helpful when you're on ESPN, when you're on ABC, when you're on Fox. It does help. It's a tremendous boost.
Well, and even I think just in terms of, like, we go to a lot of sports bars, like even flying back from the kickoff, sitting down at the airport, the TV is already on ESPN or whatever, right? You're not sitting there, excuse me, like, okay, we don't have ESPN2, or we don't have whatever. Like, it being on places where people are just going to find it naturally, I think is such a boon. And just having it be like, there's always going to be a TV on Fox or ABC or ESPN at any bar you're going to walk into. And I think that helps. Like, oh, wow, what's going on? Like, that's awesome.
That's right. Yep. That helps a lot. And I think that, we have this weird kind of the season when it started too. It's earlier than the USFL started last year, but later than the XFL started last year. But I still think they're missing their window. I was glad to see that they did take on the NCAA tournament, and actually the women's championship proved to be a bigger hurdle than even the Final Four games. So, I mean, the thing that you're going to have to embrace is competition. You're gonna have competition on TV no matter when. So when is the best time to hit this? Right after the Super Bowl, tax day, which is what it was last year for the USFL, or somewhere in between? I continue to personally believe that it's right after the Super Bowl. You ride that wave of football and try to hang on to as much of it as you can.
Yeah, and I think take on the habits that people have already built, right? Sunday morning, I'm sitting around watching football. I'm not, weather's terrible. I'm not doing anything. Baseball's not on. Paul, anything else from you? I don't want to take up too much of your time. I appreciate it today. Anything else you want to plug or get off your chest here?
No, as far as getting off the chest, probably, I was watching, I've watched most of the games so far, and this league had 5 fantastic finishes in a row, like literally coming down to the final seconds. A couple of games this last week were blowouts, but just tremendous finishes, and it's been super fun to watch so far.
And I think the story, it's been a good storyline of the season. A couple of different, with Birmingham coming back, whatever, and DC doesn't look like the same team they were last year. And, now we have the San Antonio, the Garber's injury. Okay, now we got another sign in. Like, what does that look like? Because, a week ago, it looked like San Antonio was going to be on top of, that's our team here at the Markcast that I chose. So, there's enough little things like that going on. It seemed like, especially the overlap last year where I got 16 teams I'm trying to keep track of. I'm like, I can't process all of these storylines, right? The 8 at least right now feels good in that way.
That was really tough, and when you looked at the disadvantage that I think that served up to the USFL, because you had the XFL entering its playoff stretch. And so how much, if I have limited time, how much am I going to pay attention in the league in its first week or two of the regular season versus how much am I going to pay attention when it's coming down to the line for the playoffs? And the XFL, I thought, did a fantastic job last year with the presentation and bringing that whole season to a conclusion, where the USFL maybe they were trying to do the same thing as they had last year, only in 4 different places, and it just didn't necessarily translate all that well. So it has been nice to be able to concentrate attention. But I'm kind of running into the, now it's starting to get nice outside, and now it's starting to get really busy. And so not through any conscious effort to avoid games, I'm going to start missing some of them.
It was spring break and people are gone. And I was, I'm trying to keep up traveling so I can talk about the games when we get back. No, I totally agree with that. Last point for me, I think going into next season, I don't know if we need this, but I think adding a team or two, I hate talking the expansion, but I think having it feel like this, that this speaks to the success of the league. Like we're moving on, and this is a conversation down the line, but I think they got to have some sort of hook where the USFL going from one hub to 3.5 or whatever with the Canton thing, like I didn't feel like that was enough of a hook going into the next season.
And I think that might be the greatest cause, the greatest reason maybe keep teams around for next year, is so that you do see actual expansion and not relocation. It kind of answers some of those doubts of, if we struggle right out of the gate here, are we going to get our team yanked? It gives that, a year under the belt at least before maybe you'd move somebody or whatever, just to, just to make the new markets feel better about themselves and about the patience that's going to be displayed. But I think if you would expand it all, part of that is you've already answered some of those questions. You already have some good corporate support with sponsorships. You already have an interested fan base. So choosing those expansion markets would be, making good choices there would be very important.
Well, Paul, I appreciate it. OurSports Central, statscrew.com. Appreciate it. We'll get you back on again, but always it means a lot you taking the time.
All right. Thank you so much for having me on, Reed. Great to talk with you.
Well, it's been a long time since we've had this gentleman on. It was you and Farhan wandering through the BC Lions den here at Grey Cup. Internet issues aside, we have Dave Naylor here, TSN Insider, CFL, everything else. Dave, how are you?
Very well, other than the internet issues I was just having there. But I think we got them sorted out. There you go.
That's good. I got Matt McCrane logging on. I got to do it. I'm sitting into my other chat right here. When he hops on, I'm going to tell him we're running a few minutes late. So I appreciate it.
Appreciate that, man.
So we're getting ready, CFL, everything else going on. We were talking a little bit of the NFL kickoff and all of that. Where do you want to start? What's on your mind right now?
Well, let's start with the kickoff, because I think that's I was at the CFL Combine where they were talking about all that. And it was funny because I don't think people really knew how close the NFL was to moving its kickoff 5 days later. Right. I made it was sort of references to the NFL is going to talk about this maybe as early as next week. And then they pulled the trigger a week later. So I'm kind of interested in how that may have influenced the CFL's decision one way or another. And I think it's always been a different discussion because kickoffs and just the return game in general is so much a bigger part of Canadian football. And it's more celebrated. And returners are more stars, some of the greatest stars in the league. And the NFL, because they kind of phased it out slowly over time, and because those players in the history of the game have not been as prominent relative to the other players in the league as they are in the CFL. So there's a lot of sensitivity about this. And the curious thing to me is you see fans on Twitter and things like this. They seem to think the league has some agenda to get rid of an exciting play that has nothing to do with injuries. I don't know what that agenda would be. I don't know why, the commissioner and the different people in the rules committee and competition committees would say, yeah, let's get kickoff returns out of the game. It doesn't make any sense to me. But I do think there is a greater sensitivity to the fact, to the idea of removing them. Now, you're still going to get a lot more punting in the CFL than you do in the NFL, and you have no fair catch. So it's not like the return game is going to disappear. But, there's two proposals I think they're looking at. One is that you would give teams the option to scrimmage on the 40-yard line as opposed to accepting a kickoff, which they already have for field goals. And 96% of the time last year, teams took the ball in the 40 as opposed to a return. So you're going to basically wipe out returns after touchdowns, I think we can say pretty safely. And then, again, the only time you don't give that choice is the final 3 minutes of a game, because that protects the onside kick. But the other possibility is looking at a version of what the NFL just did, the XFL model. I think that one is on the table as well. And whether they would make some tweaks to it or come up with their own. The buzz I'm hearing, Reed, is, and I think this is smart, that the league is probably going to strike a committee and study this for a year, which would allow them to see what happens in the NFL. It allowed them to look at their own data a little closer. And I think it's such a fundamental thing. The CFL has been around, Canadian football in one form or another, has been around for, over 100 years. So there's not this, we got to get this done before kickoff 2024, right? The game has survived for a long time. But I do believe that, this is being driven by the same thing that is driven by in the NFL. The rate of injuries on these plays is substantially higher. That costs roster churn. That's bad for players. That's bad for owners who have to replace injured players. It's just one of those things that I think it was kind of naive to think that the NFL was going to go here, college football was going to go here, but in the CFL, we're fine. I said to somebody, it's like saying that, if you smoke a cigarette in Buffalo, it's bad for you, but you can do it in Toronto. It just doesn't make sense. So the physics are a little different in the two games, but not that dramatically different. So I'm not surprised the CFL is dealing with this issue.
Well, it's the same irony where the UFL now is using an even more elongated NFL kickoff.
It's bizarre, right? That the alternative spring league football, if we can call it that, is the inspiration for the most substantial change we've seen to the NFL game in my lifetime, just in terms of, how often you're going to see it. And the league that developed it isn't using it. It's kind of, what it reminds me is like, you're going to put a piece of furniture out to your curb and somebody comes over 5 minutes later and like takes it away. I feel like the UFL or the XFL put its kickoff out to the curb, and the NFL came along in a pickup truck and said, "I'll take that."
It's funny, and I know you're busy, man, but we had Daryl Johnston on a week before the week of the kickoff, and it was very interesting kind of hearing his thoughts on all of that. So, it's a little bit of egg in the face on that, but certainly, they're doing the best they can.
Absolutely. Hey, look, I think everybody recognizes that one of the real opportunities that spring football brings about is to experiment with stuff, right? And people forget, and correct me if I'm wrong in this because you're the XFL expert, but I mean that camera shot, above the huddle. Yeah, like we use that all the time, right? Mm-hmm. And the NFL uses it ubiquitously, and that was an XFL invention. So I do think it's great to have leagues that can try stuff that maybe established leagues are a little afraid to try. And by the way, on the XFL kickoff, I loved it the first time I saw it. I was always surprised, especially with the grumbling in the NFL, that didn't get more attention. Obviously, it was getting a lot more attention behind the scenes than anybody knew, because they didn't go from 0 to 100 on this in a month, right? They've obviously been looking at this for a long time, and major rule changes often take like a tipping point. And I think for the NFL, it was 11 kickoffs in the Super Bowl that all sailed through the end zone. I mean, like, what are we doing?
In terms of moving on to some other CFL stuff, in terms of the Chad Kellys of it all, has anyone thought of just deleting Twitter, maybe pulling back his phone? Like, this is all I've seen the last couple of weeks. What's going on with this?
Yeah, I have reason to believe that Chad Kelly has probably been advised to, use discretion on social media, but he's obviously not doing so to the degree that people would want him to. I think this is a real tough story for a few reasons, including, the presumption of innocence, which we have to maintain. And I know that a lot of people are looking at Chad's history of questionable decision making and saying, well, this lines up with who he was before he came to Canada. And I think we got to try to be fair and objective and allow him the presumption of innocence as we discuss this. But it's strange because Chad Kelly was a guy who, the moment he came here, I think people were kind of, I don't say holding their breath, but keeping their fingers crossed. And it's not so much about him. I would just say the history of players who've been out of the NFL largely for behavioral reasons or character questions and come to Canada, usually those kinds of things follow them here. It tends not to get left at the border. And Chad Kelly, for 2 full seasons, I mean, what was the most controversial thing he did? He went on radio last winter and said he'd love to play for the Saskatchewan Roughriders while he was still under contract to the Toronto Argonauts. That would probably be, the most controversial thing he did, right? And then, there's the bad performance in the Eastern Final, and bad is a mild word. I mean, I've never seen a player's playoff performance that was so unrecognizable from what he'd done consistently in the regular season on any team at any level in my life. You put that game up against everything else Chad Kelly did, it's unrecognizable.
I think he just threw another interception right now.
It was unreal. And not just the numbers of interceptions, but if you actually watch the plays, they are textbook awful, right? And I'm not a break it down kind of guy, but even I can see that when you're looking one way of the field and you pivot and throw off your back foot on the other side of the field, off balance, you're probably going to get picked anyway. Then you have, before he was named the league's MOP, he has the concussion story that he was concussed, and that's why he left the field afterwards without shaking hands. Well, I can tell you, given the sensitivity of that issue, the league went through the tape play by play, to try to find any play where Chad Kelly might have been concussed. They did not find one. And I think if you look at his whereabouts in the days that followed that game, he wasn't necessarily, those weren't the actions of somebody who was dealing with a serious head injury, is what I was saying. So I just say the league, and I believe he signed his, at the end of the season, when you have to sign your exit, that you're healthy, he signed that. So that was a lot of people in the league looked at that and went, wow, what's going on there? And now you have the civil suit, which again, we can't really comment on, but we can comment on his social media presence. And, like the video he made during the CFL Combine, where he went on and dropped a bunch of F-bombs. And I would say objectively, I would describe him as showing a complete lack of self-awareness. I'm comfortable with that description of what he looked like on that video. I mean, that's the face of your franchise. That's the MOP of your league. Like, that is behavior and conduct that is so out of touch with your role, and that, again, I think it just kind of raised questions about where his head is at, that he would think that was appropriate or acceptable. And then since then, you've had kind of cryptic tweets, that can be read a whole bunch of different ways. But again, for somebody who's facing potentially, a legal situation, or is facing a legal situation, and is also facing the court of public opinion, which in this case is, a big one for him, because a lot of people are judging him and saying, this is the guy we heard about before he came to the CFL. Now we're seeing it. And every time he puts out one of those tweets, it kind of moves people more in that direction. So I think I asked the CFL Players Association about it when I was at the Combine. They said, look, we don't proactively reach out and tell players what to do or not do. We're here to accept their requests for help or guidance or counseling or whatever they need. We're here for them, but we don't, identify guys and go out for them and say, hey, what are you doing? That would be more the role of his employer or the league. And I don't know that that's happened, but I would be surprised if there haven't been efforts to try to get him off social media. And I also wouldn't be surprised if he's ignored them.
Yeah, because the last thing was obviously the Caitlin Clark and her getting the contract coming out and him saying like, oh, that's CFL money. I saw Nathan Rourke tweet out, kind of the league taking too long. Is this just time? And
yeah, I don't quite get that. Like, and I'm not going to be, I think the league's messaging on this one hasn't been great. Like it took several days until the suit was filed, till they had a statement. Chad tweeted out a denial, and then it got deleted. The Argos haven't really said much, and I don't know what they can say, but it feels like there should be a little more clarity about what's going on right now. And I don't know if you can put him on an administrative, as off season, right? So I don't know what putting him on a leave does, but even symbolically, that might show that you're a little more proactive, that, hey, until we can clear this matter up, we've put Chad Kelly on a suspended list, whatever it may be. It doesn't really affect anything because there's no off season for the CFL anyway, but it would at least sort of clarify maybe a little bit where they stand. But beyond that, I don't have a ton of criticism for the league, and particularly on the it's taking too long part here, right? Like the league has hired an independent investigation to be done on this, okay? Which I think people would say is probably the right course, right? And look, I don't know if Chad Kelly's going to get favorable judgment because he's a starting quarterback and the highest paid player in the league in the MOP. I would hope not. But I can tell you he's getting a different process, because we have seen other players who've been involved in situations, and the league, by and large, has acted very quickly without very long process, which is their right to do, I guess, unless they want, if they want, they to the point that they could be sued by somebody if that person thought they were acting inappropriately. So. But we can clearly say that Chad Kelly is getting a different process. He is getting a much more thorough process. And I don't have a problem with the league saying, hey, this is a guy who has tremendous importance to our franchise in our biggest city where we've been trying to gain traction. This is a guy who has tremendous importance to our league. He's our reigning MOP. We're going to take our time and step back and let somebody else deliver us a report on this. Do we want the league to rush this? I don't necessarily feel that way. So that's what they're doing. I asked Randy Ambrosi, the commissioner, about this at the Combine, and he said, we're not going to act or comment until we get that report. And that seems like a legitimate position to me. I guess the question is, when's that report coming out? because we're like a month away from training camp, less than a month away from the opening of training camp. And, you think that a decision has got to come down before, or that report and the league's decision based on that report has to come down before the start of training camp. So we're all kind of waiting to see where this is going to go. And I would expect that, this may be framed from the league's perspective as kind of an HR issue. I mean, there's not a criminal accusation here, right? There's a civil suit, and the descriptions that are in that suit, would sort of line up with inappropriate behavior in the workplace, right? So, is that the framework that the leagues or the Argos are going to use to deal with this? I don't know, but I think it's an issue that's been hanging over the whole offseason, and it feels like Chad Kelly's been hanging over the whole offseason when you go back to the concussion stuff. So I just on a personal level, I'm kind of sad just to see, that when we did a feature on Chad Kelly a year ago, and we were at Jim Kelly's house, and Jim Kelly said, I would not be doing this if you'd called me 2 years ago, because I didn't really believe Chad had matured and seen the light. And it was my producer, Matt Dunn, who wrote the line in the feature. He said, in Toronto, there is no past, only a future. That was the line that I thought was kind of the line of the piece, right? That Chad Kelly's able to come across the border and people aren't familiar with all the things about him from the past. They don't care. You've got a fresh slate, man, run with it. And for most of 2 years, he did that. And so just on a personal level for him, I'm sorry that, he's kind of, his behavior has become, a little worrisome. I particularly when you see that video. I mean, that video is just, you cannot do that as a starting quarterback in the Canadian Football League. That cannot be your representation. And again, I don't know what the Argos of the league are going to do about it, but it's not certainly anything that would be considered acceptable.
Rapid fire, last one here because I got to hop over. Elk sale, everything. What's going on with that? I know we're trying to privatize. And
I think we're about a week away, maybe, or within the next week from the sale of the Elks being slimmed down to a short list, and it may be a long short list. I mean, one of the things I think you always got to remember in these situations is, Reed, you and I can put our hand up, form a partnership, and sign a non-disclosure agreement and get all the financials of the Elks and say we want to buy them, right? I mean, basically, if you knock at their door and look presentable, you're going to be given an opportunity to look at it. So, I reported the number was more than a dozen individuals or groups had looked forward, and I think part of my role in reporting that, I think from the Elks perspective, is they kind of wanted everybody in Canada to know about this, right? Like they understand that TSN is a platform that's widely read, particularly for CFL, and I think they weren't unhappy to have me reporting on that because they knew that anybody wasn't aware that the Elks were for sale now might be. It's a real fascinating sale, and I'll tell you. First of all, and again, somebody else told me who I trust that the number was got up to 19. I don't know what it is now, and I don't know what the short list will be. But, for a league that's been used to having fire sales or distress sales or hoping somebody comes to the rescue, this is not that. But here's the interesting thing. People ask, well, what's the franchise going to sell for? Well, it's owned by a nonprofit. It's not even clear where the money would go. If somebody paid $10 million, $20 million, $30 million for the Edmonton Elks, paying it to the nonprofit makes no sense because there's nowhere for it to go. It doesn't get divided among the board. So I think where the negotiation is going to come in here is how much are you willing to invest in the team, in a new stadium, in the facilities, in the infrastructure, in raising the team's profile and driving the season ticket base. That's going to be the negotiating point, I think. So you can see a situation where the franchise fee is $1, whatever. It just disappears into the ether. But the money number that's going to matter is if somebody's willing to pay, $30 million for the Edmonton Elks, $25 million for the Edmonton Elks, 99% of that is going to go to investing on the team, not into the pocket of the current owners, because the current owners really don't have private pockets. So I think it's a good opportunity for them to sort of set this right. And I asked the question of somebody, is there any chance that this doesn't happen? Like this stays as a community-owned team, like it has been for 75 years. And I was told that the only scenario would be somebody who has a ton of money and really, really wants to see the Edmonton Elks stay community owned and would donate that money to the board and say, here you go, keep running the team. Here's my $30 million, on. I don't think that's going to happen. No, I think we're going to see a private sale.
Well, there you go, Dave. Let's get you on again here when we got more stable internet, but it held up today. We got the data, everything else. I appreciate it.
Sorry for the delay off the top, but as you know, always enjoyed joining you, Reed. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks. And yeah, CFL, it's almost June.
Yeah, it is. Not far away.
Well, this is kind of the man of the hour here for the DC Defenders. Great season thus far, and then certainly a killer game here over the weekend. Matt McCrane, how are you doing, sir?
I'm good, man. I appreciate you having me on.
It's good. I know it's trying to get these remote stuff and with the training camp and hubs and everything. I appreciate it. You're back here again, obviously with the Guardians back in 2020. What's it feel like being around here right now?
It's exciting. I think I talked about it a little bit in the post-game interview with Jordan is, the merger of the two leagues and to kind of, I guess, skip on forward a little bit, but the merger of the two leagues has been really exciting, really cool. We've been able to put a good product on the field that I think people are starting to enjoy. So that's been good, man. It's been really well ran and has been really exciting. So I've got nothing bad to say so far.
What's cool too is, you never really know going into these leagues, right? Who's going to get spotlighted, right? We had Cavante Turbin back with USFL and all that. Special teams, especially kickers right now, insane between you and, Jake Bates and everybody else. Like, what is that? Is it just getting the opportunity? Is it just because if it's like one of the major storylines of the season?
Yeah, I think there's, not just me and Jake, right? Everybody in the league, I think I saw the stat, we're like 92% or something across the league so far through 3 weeks. And so I think for a lot of people it's just limited opportunity in the National Football League, right? Like there's only one active roster kicker out of the 32 teams. So you're, on each team. So you're talking 32 kickers in the world. And it's hard to get an opportunity. I've been in and out of the National Football League, for 5 years off and on, from practice squad to active to COVID year and filling in for injured guys. And so really I've only had one genuine opportunity to say, okay, I think this is my job. And that was when I was with Oakland. Daniel Carlson got cut by Minnesota and then they moved on from me and Daniel's been with them ever since. And so I think it's just proving that there's a lot of really good kickers out there on the market. And I say a lot, limited, right? There's only 8 guys in this league. So not very many. I'd say maybe, 15, 20 guys that deserve a shot to play in the National Football League that just, whether it's through injury or guys are performing well in the NFL. And so it's limited opportunity to get in. And so I think you're just seeing that right now is there's really good talent out there and kickers are proving that week in and week out.
You guys have to get jazzed up for each other, right? especially like coming off of your game and Jake and everything else. Like, what is that like? And just see it, these like record setting kicks and you have, super like 50-yard plus. This is nothing to kind of sneeze at.
Yeah, I think it's always been that way for kickers. I don't think if there's a kicker out there that's wishing ill will on another kicker just to get an opportunity, like that's a bad thing coming. That's some bad mojo. But Jake and I were kind of back and forth, on social media. He commented on I think a post that I was in after the game-winning field goal and said, congrats or something. I was like, dude, I commented back, said, how are you going to cover me up? Right? How are you going to steal the spotlight with another 60 plus? And so we have good banter back and forth, but, I stay in contact with a lot of these kickers. We all train together some of us train out in California together with Nick Novak. We see each other at combines, as honors combines. So it's a tight knit group. And I think we're all cheering for each other, man. It's really good opportunity for us.
In terms of the kind of the game itself, this last one with the game winning quick really kind of spotlights, right, the UFL rules, and we're able to do this big 11-point swing and all that. What is that like just from, I don't know, a game strategy, game planning, and because it really is, you're really in all these games until the very end.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Like I learned my lesson just this week because we were down a touchdown, And in a normal circumstance, I would say, okay, I'm telling my long snapper and holder, like, we're dead is what we call it. Hey, are we dead? We're done for the game. Like, if we score, we're going for 2, right? Or in this league, of course, we're going to go for, 2 or 3. And so I went to Coach Barlow and I said, we're dead, right? I think there was like 2.5 minutes in the game and we were down by a touchdown. And he said, yeah, you guys are dead. So I literally untied my shoes and I told Paxton and Trey, I'm like, hey guys, we're dead. When we score, we're going to go for it. Well, what happened was Arlington ended up getting the ball and they kicked a field goal. And now I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, with the new rule, the 4th and 12, like we could be back up potentially. So I tied my shoes back on. I got us all stretched back out and ready to go. And sure enough, we drive the whole field. We score a touchdown, and we're back in the game and need a field goal. So I think it's an adjustment for a lot of us because, the 4th and 12, it's more engaging for the fans. It's fun and exciting, and it gives a team an opportunity to score points quickly. And we've seen that the last 2 weeks in a row.
In terms of kind of the DC locker room, the vibe, kind of what is everything like there? And Coach Barlow, I mean, I feel like even last year kind of runs a heavy, like a tight ship there. What is that like? What's it like being in the locker room there?
Barlow is definitely a player's coach. I've had a few of those in the past, and that can really relate to the players. He's very open to different ideas and strategies and things that we go with. He's got an open door policy. So that's really cool to see from him is that he was a player once, he gets it. And so, but, we're going on our second year of having a really good squad. Last year we had a great team. Obviously we lost the championship game, but we're starting to build that culture, and it's really cool to see us excel. Now we've had really close games, and I think we can play a lot better. And our offense and defense have talked about that. Like, hey, we need to put a better product on the field, because we've proven to do that last year. And so, we're building that culture. We got a lot of the same guys back. We got some new faces, but it's really cool to see that now in year 2 of this same team, just starting to build some chemistry.
Yeah, because it's a lot of carryover, but then between injuries or players, getting other opportunities, things. I mean, it is, Jordan's there, obviously, kind of at the helm, but there, it's a different chemistry this year. Is that do you feel like you guys are getting into this now as we get into week 4? Because it's so hard with like that limited, training camp, and we're trying to come in. Like, you think you're finally hitting it? Because even like last year, some of these teams, it's taking you to week 7, 8 to really kind of get things going.
Well, I mean, that's exactly what happened with us last year. It took some time, especially like defensively, to really start locking it down. And Greg's been on them. Coach Williams has been on them. Like, hey, listen, we've got to kind of finally wake up and say, listen, we are a solid defensive unit, because Greg's a phenomenal defensive coach. Like, he is on those guys week in and week out. He's yay. Honestly, I'm witnessing it on the sideline, watching it, and so he's very tough. But I think that's where. It takes time, right? We don't have we had 4 weeks of training camp, but we don't have an off season to develop. We didn't have, the luxury of what some of these NFL guys have. Heck, we didn't even know if we were going to have a league, right? And so when it came out that we had a league, we had a little group chat of all of us and staying in contact with each other. But yeah, I think it's going to take time. We're only through week 3, but still to be able to pull off a win. And I said this the other day in an interview, is that no matter in what sport you're in professionally, and I say that because this league is professional ball, because there's guys that are 2, 3, 4, 5-year NFL vets, and even a 1 year out, like, there is really good talent on these teams. And I think that's what we need to get a point across to fans and people looking to watch this league, is like, listen, like, we're not guys that don't deserve opportunities, or we're not good enough to play in the National Football League. Like, that's not the case at all. It's just limited opportunity. So we're able to put up a good product. It's just going to take time. It just takes a couple weeks to get our momentum and figure out what we do and who we are.
In the episode this is all going to be a part of, we're talking kind of XFL and USFL and markets and people, what teams have fans showing up, and obviously DC and St. Louis are really, obviously the tent poles, right, for in terms of like fans coming out. What's it like playing there? What's it like? No, I know you were in Arlington last week, but what's it like playing there and just knowing that team really is full support of you guys?
Yeah, I like the soccer stadium. I like the capacity of that. It's really a cool environment because we especially towards the end of last season. I mean, we packed that thing, 12, 15,000 people. And so I really like that aspect of it. When I was playing with New York, we played at MetLife. And so we played at a massive stadium, and we still had a really good crowd in New York before COVID hit. And I remember when we played at DC, like, okay, this is a somewhat intimidating atmosphere. I've played in big time college football games in NFL with 100,000 plus. And I said, in order to get that professional feel, you need that fan attendance, I think. And, last year when we played in St. Louis, they're packing that dome full and opening up new sections each week. So the fan support is crucial, right, into the success of this league. And I think that's the point that we have to get across, just like I said in your previous question, was that the product is there and the talent is there. It's guys that should be playing on Sunday and that have played on Sunday. But it's spring football. I mean, what else are we going to watch on TV as fans, right? Like, it's a great product and a great atmosphere. And, again, I couldn't be any more excited with it. I think it's been good so far.
Yeah, we were at Audi Field for the kickoff back in 2020, and then I went last year. I'm Seattle, and so I went when you guys took care of the Sea Dragons there to go on. I was removed for my own safety from the beer snake section because I had on all my. And they said that the security. They said we got to relocate you. I said I'm just,
right.
But it's because it's like a hardcore fan base, but it's all these spring football. I'm like this isn't like you're going to like no one's attacking me here at the XFL game, but it's certainly a passionate fan base there. So it's exciting to see.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the beer steak section, I think they opened up another section for our home game against the Battlehawks in a couple weeks. They're doing a promo I saw, which is kind of cool. They're doing $16 tickets or something in the 100 sections. So they're utilizing my number to sell some tickets, which is cool. And try to make it affordable, like bring the families out, bring the kids out on Saturday and Sundays and get to watch NFL caliber talent. Like what's any better than that? It's really cool.
Last question here. Just speaking of, fan support, right? You guys are going into Birmingham this weekend. Going to be a big one. They're one of the tremendous teams. And obviously everyone's supporting that. Thoughts going into the weekend, and what are you looking forward to?
Yeah. So it's going to be a huge game. I was going to have a watch party at my restaurant back in Texas, but there's another kickoff same time, and it's a regional game. So we won't be able to have a watch party in Brownwood, Texas with it. But I'm excited for the opportunity because we believe that we should have won that championship game. And so we see this as the XFL versus the USFL, championship game. And so that's been our mentality this week as a team is like, we've heard the things about Birmingham and that they're a really solid football club, but we're eager to take it on and come to their, their home field. So again, I'm excited for this league. I'm happy for the opportunity and grateful for the opportunity because it's a platform that not only me as a kicker, but other positions have that we need the game film in order, if we want to go to the National Football League or continue playing in this league, whatever it is, we need the game tape. And so I'm thankful for those that made it happen in short term because merging a league like this from XFL to USFL, I don't know how they pulled it off, but I'm glad they did.
Yeah, no, as I was at San Antonio, I also don't know. I also expected you guys to win the championship game. So that was as much of a flabbergasted. But, I mean, give Arlington their flowers. You got a little revenge last week. So that was good. I mean, I know it's not the same as getting the trophy, but
I think this game will be fun, man. I mean, like I said, we're seeing it as like the XFL versus USFL championship. That's how we're kind of approaching it, and take that mentality of how we've created the XFL in our head against the USFL. It should be fun. It should be fun for fans to watch. So if that's in your area, man, the people that are listening to this, like it'll be one to tune into.
Well, Matt, I appreciate it taking the time. Dave Naylor was running long. I appreciate you waiting a few minutes a week. I'm like trying to get all this going. So super appreciate it. Good luck. Even though you took the Sea Dragons out of the playoffs last year, we'll be supporting. So good luck and have a great weekend.
Yeah, appreciate your support, man.
Big thanks to all of our guests today. Always appreciate getting to catch up with Paul Reeths, taking time from his work with the websites that he runs, coming on talking about, good wide-ranging conversation. Don't want to be too negative, Nancy, but, it's an interesting discussion here. I mean, I think the Fox, maybe overestimated and we're giving away tickets and now we're trying to build this back up. I thought Paul probably vocalized it better succinctly than I ever could, but I thought that was a great discussion with Paul. I know Dave Naylor is a busy guy a week before the draft, so I appreciate him taking the time with everything. Always great getting Dave on. I think it's been since the Grey Cup, so it's been way too long since we've had Dave Naylor on the podcast. And then Matt McCrane coming on DC Defenders. Really appreciate that and him taking the time and them setting that up with the league. Should be a good show next week. I know we have the NFL draft. Got a good guest coming on that is very NFL draft focused, but he is very anxious to talk about the UFL. So we will get him on, working for a couple different interviews with the league, and then we'll figure out some CFL stuff as well. So like I said, like and subscribe if you like all this stuff. Get us to 3,500 subscribers, and we'll see you guys next time. Hope you have a great weekend. Take care.